Hello, witchy people. You may be wondering why I'm sat here in the dark with nothing but a cup of coffee, a solitary lit candle, and a snoring dog to keep me company. Well, many years ago, I used to run a website called The Haunted ChaCha. And on that site, I would write down the tales that people had told me, not necessarily ghost stories, just tales of strange happenings, weird goings on in strange places, eerie places, places that were supposedly haunted, maybe. So if you want to hear a few, grab a cup of coffee, sit down, and I'll tell you some. This story doesn't have a name, and it's not a ghost story. It was told to me by my grandfather, and it was set during the Second World War. Now, he told me a lot of things that happened during the war, but many of these things were amusing, funny stories, and I think he used that to cover up and try to forget the harrowing and horrific things that he had seen. And he once told me, nobody wins a war. Even the victors are losers. During the war, my grandfather was placed into a special platoon. Him and several others were, I suppose you could call it special ops sort of thing. And their mission one day was to find a German bunker, go down into it and annihilate the German officers that were there. Of course, nobody wanted to do this, including my grandfather. There were 5 men chosen to complete this task. But it was wartime, and whether they liked or agreed with it or not, it was their duty, and it was something they were bound and honoured to do. So the time came when the bunker had been located, and my grandfather and 4 of his team were sent down. What was strange was that there seemed to be no opposition. There was no one there to stop them. There were no guards. But it was very dark, very, very quiet. The lights, basic though they were on and were dimly lighting the long, thin corridor. They got to the strategy room, which is a huge room where all the German officers would be sat round. And as they walked in, guns held up, ready to do their duty, they were met with nothing. Silence and death. There were 12 German officers sat round what could only be described as a war table. They had notebooks in front of them, they had folders and files in front of them, and even a pen. But nothing else. And every single one of them was dead. There were no bullet shots, no bullet holes, no stab wounds, no signs of poison. They were just all dead. My grandfather took from an epaulet of one of those German officers a small token. It was two little acorns woven with pure gold thread. And he kept them until he died. And it wasn't a trophy. Please don't get me wrong and think it was a trophy. It was something to remind him how horrific and strange and awful war can be. No explanation was ever given as to how or why these German officers had died. And it was a mystery that was never solved. Well, at least not to the everyday lower ranking soldiers.